We have one question from Vicki Johnson in Orlando about freight. Vicki would like to know, does your plan factor in drone delivery traffic?
Drone delivery is a very innovative and at this point in time early in the development stages. We have reviewed the potential of drone delivery and its reduction on the freight transportation system. But given the size and scale of most freight, the volume of what's being moved, it will still require a significant amount of trucks and continued usage of our rail network to move the majority of our freight and goods. Though you can see for local deliveries and parcel movement the potential for drones to be used in the near future.
All right, and we have a comment on pedestrian safety coming through. Let's see, Reddit from Winter Garden says that he thinks pedestrian safety would be improved if pedestrians weren't glued to their cell phones and their Bluetooth headsets. We see distractions both for drivers and pedestrians are certainly major issues that we all need to be aware of.
And this is one of the things that the Best Foot Forward campaign calls attention to as they're out talking to our community that help make things safer for pedestrians.
Are there any plans to straighten out I-4 near Lee Road with this I-4 Ultimate project? So that is, are there any plans to straighten out I-4 near Lee Road?
Yes, the project will include some degree of straightening out the road and handling the elevation changes at the same time. I think the person who contacted us probably has a particular interest in that area known as the Fairbanks curves, which have presented some safety problems in the past. So all that will be corrected as part of the project.
A Villa from Lake Mary says, will the complete privatization of the I-4 remodeling assist in how long it will take to finish or the quality of the work?
The answer is yes, and the advantage to this approach using a public-private partnership is all the funding will be in place when the work begins. The more traditional method, it's pay as you go, and that's what can result in some of the lengthy construction projects that people may see around the region. So this whole thing is designed to really accelerate it and get the job done quickly. Also, in terms of the life expectancy of the project, there are incentives built in the contract so that the full life expectancy of the project can be factored in terms of value engineering.
Great. And the next question comes from Curtis Leonard in Longwood, Florida. And his question is, what can MetroPlan do to ensure sustainable materials are used to reduce traffic disruption and improve safety in the region?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that the work of MetroPlan being a planning agency, the things that we can do are limited, but we do have the ability to work with our partners, those who are responsible for constructing the roads, the Florida DOT, for the mega projects, for our local government partners, primarily the 3 counties who build the local roads within their jurisdictions. And we can certainly work with them to discuss using sustainable materials.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we have a question from social media wanting to know if the Central Polk Parkway is a MetroPlan priority since it affects the Orlando-bound freight.
That's a great question. We have a strong relationship and ongoing coordination with Polk County and our counterpart of the Polk County Transportation Planning Organization. We work very closely and coordinate our major planning projects. So while the Polk Parkway is not directly in our service area and our planning boundary, there is a definite coordination that takes place between the entities to ensure consistency and continuity in the system.
Okay, and before we do, we have several SunRail questions coming in. A lot of interest in this project. The first is from Cheryl Pope from Winter Springs. She would like to know, when is SunRail going to start and where are the locations going to be?
Well, the grand opening event is going to be held on April 30th, and the first day of passenger service will be on May 1st. The best place to see a detailed map for the location of all of the stations is at sunrail.com.
Okay, thank you very much. And Kara Ravello from Longwood says that she has a concern about SunRail scheduling. She says SunRail needs to be expanded to accommodate more locations especially, and in order for SunRail to succeed that it needs to also run on the weekends.
We completely agree with that. But as you see the evolution of rail transit systems in communities across America, it generally begins with one phase and then grows over time to include services to other areas. Also, it is not unusual that when a system first begins, the hours of operation, the days of operation are limited. People become accustomed to it, the demand grows, the popularity of it grows, and the hours of service, the days of service can be expanded over time if the demand is there to support the service, and we're confident it will be.
We have a question from a Maitland resident. What are the feeder lines that will integrate into SunRail and into the population centers? So how can they find out more about the feeder lines that will integrate into SunRail and into the population centers?
Well, I believe the feeder lines that the question refers to are studies that are underway currently along State Road 50, along US 192 in Osceola County, along the beach line area from connecting the Orlando International Airport to the convention center. And those are studies that are well underway, determining what technology is most appropriate. And then, of course, there's the LYNX bus system, which is looking at changing their scheduling and their routing of some of their fixed route services, current fixed route services, to be feeder bus service, to provide the feeder bus service necessary for SunRail.
Okay, thank you. And we had a question from social media asking, what can Central Florida do to promote ride-sharing services? So what can Central Florida do to promote ride-sharing?
Well, in preparation for SunRail coming online, there has been a push by the Florida Department of Transportation, who promotes rideshare and also has a Rethink Your Commute, which is a website that commuters can go to get more information about ride sharing. It's rethinkyourcommute.com.
Great, thank you, Virginia. And Rethink can help you out with matching you up with a carpool partner. They can help with van pool services. They can come out to your business and do a lunch and learn and tell your employees, see how they might be able to share a ride. So they can offer a lot of great services for the public. And again, that was rethinkyourcommute.com. We have another question coming in here. Is MetroPlan Orlando concerned with improving crossing and perimeter safety along the SunRail route, and when will this work begin?
Well, in transportation, safety is always priority number one. There have been a number of improvements implemented already along the line to be sure that the crossings are safe. And there's an enormous public education effort underway to be respectful of the tracks and of those crossings. There will be more trains than there have been in the past, and people need to get accustomed to that and to be very, very respectful of the dangers associated with that track. This is private property, trespassing is not allowed, and people need to be very careful when crossing the tracks, either as a pedestrian or in a vehicle, to be sure that they're watching the gates and the lights, and to be sure there's adequate room on the other side once they've crossed the track to be in a safe area so they're not stuck on the tracks.
Okay, and our next question is from Robert in Orlando, who would like to know, what can the public do to bring weekend service earlier? Would we have to break ridership expectations to do it?
Well, I'd say let's get weekday service started, up in operation. I think it's going to prove to be a very, very popular service. I can tell you we had an event up at the DeBarry station last Saturday and another one at the Sand Lake Road station on Sunday. A lot of enthusiasm about it, and a lot of enthusiasm about doing service on Saturdays and Sundays to serve people who are not regular commuters in the I-4 corridor. So I think we're going to hear a lot about that in the coming months.
Okay, thank you. Leslie in Lake Mary would like to know what plans are in place to facilitate SunRail commuters from the Sand Lake station to the business areas in the Sand Lake and I-4 area.
Again, this would be provided primarily by the LYNX bus system, providing connections to those employers. But there's also the possibility, again, probably through the Rethink program, of getting those staff members to come out and talk to the employers about creating some sort of opportunity for their employees through a ride share, a van pool program offered by the employers themselves.
Next question, is the SunRail quieter than CSX trains? That is to ask, will the SunRail need to sound off with their horns as often as the CSX trains do? And we have an associated question from another participant. What happened to the money for quiet zones?
Well, thank you so much for that question. Quiet zones, in the way that they exist, and with trains going down the corridor, are required to blow the horns at each of the crossings. This is a federal regulation that must be adhered to unless a quiet zone has been implemented within the area. We have been working hard over the past 3 years to address the concern of residents throughout Central Florida with the communities that are along the SunRail corridor. We just concluded a study which gets us closer to finding out exactly how much it will cost to implement quiet zones along the SunRail corridor. However, it comes down to the bottom line is how much funding would be available for it. And right now, there has been no funding identified. With regard to whether SunRail is quieter than CSX, I don't know that it is considered to be quieter in terms of the horns. I think the two different technologies might be a little bit different in terms of decibels, but the overall, when you're talking about these trains, when they cross a crossing, again, as Harry mentioned, safety first, and they must alert passengers or vehicles and pedestrians to the fact that trains are coming up to the crossing.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Catherine in Altamont Springs, who says, senior citizens have been big supporters and contributors to SunRail. What special outreach is planned that would be for special services to benefit seniors?
Well, teams are available to come out and meet with any group that would like to learn more about how to use SunRail and how the system works. So if you could contact us and give us some contact information, we'll be happy to arrange a speaker for your group to explain more about this. Also, I'd like to mention there's a very nice accommodation in terms of fare that senior citizens and people with disabilities are able to travel at half fare. So when Alex spoke before about the base fare of $2 and $1 for each county line that's crossed, for seniors, it's half that amount all the time.
Great, thank you very much. And we have a question about land use from Fraser in Orlando, who says, many of the recommendations from the How Shall We Grow are now part of transportation planning. However, how are the counties and the cities implementing the land planning recommendations for compact growth and for environmental protection?
That can be seen in a couple aspects of the long-range plan. When it comes to local government planning, that you are seeing increased densities and where local governments want to see dense compact growth as it relates to the 2040 long-range plan. Some of the principles out of, or the 4C principles out of the How Shall We Grow, the corridors, the centers, countryside, and the conservation area is really seen through some of the density maps that were shown early on. Gary mentioned a lot of the density, population, and job employment are going to be located around our region's major transportation corridors, and we are seeing a really significant growth in density and intensity really throughout the entire region, from the north all the way to the south.
Will All Aboard Florida preclude a future high-speed rail line in Central Florida?
Well, All Aboard Florida is a form of high-speed rail, or should we say higher speed rail than is available today. It is not up to the standards of some of the European or Asian systems, but it will provide a very attractive alternative with being able to travel between Orlando International Airport and downtown Miami in 3 hours. That's certainly a better option than is available today. That I'm pretty sure will satisfy short-term, mid-term travel demand between Orlando and Miami along the East Coast. But there are, of course, future opportunities. We're looking very seriously at some form of enhanced rail transit service to better connect the Orlando area with the Tampa Bay area or even the Jacksonville area. So there are other opportunities for future forms of high or higher speed rail transit service for us here in Central Florida. we will be the transportation hub of the state, which I think is pretty exciting.
Okay, great. And we have another question asking about all aboard's potential impact on Amtrak. So what might be the potential impacts on Amtrak?
Well, Amtrak is the national passenger rail system, and it does provide service throughout the state of Florida today. It serves more stations than the All Aboard Florida service would provide. So the service coming through the Orlando area originates from up in Jacksonville and serves Orlando, and then from the south heads over toward Tampa and eventually down to South Florida. So Amtrak, I think, is serving a different market than All Aboard Florida is serving. Amtrak provides good connectivity with the entire East Coast, where All Aboard Florida is about simply connecting some major cities within the state of Florida.
Okay, and we have a great question coming in, which is about terminology. What does intermodal mean? And, you know, that's a word that we use a lot in transportation world, and we kind of have our own language. So can we explain what does intermodal mean?
Well, sure, Cynthia. In transportation world, we talk about modes of travel. Rail is a mode of travel. The highways are another mode. We also have several others, such as air travel, pedestrian, bike. Each one of those is a mode, and when you have something that's intermodal, that means that you have several of the modes of travel linking up there together. So that's exactly what this center will do with ground transportation, air traffic, and rail services all involved, as well as pedestrian, because it's going to have a people mover system to get people back and forth, and cars in the parking garage. So it's very intermodal.
All right, and we have a couple of questions on the transit blueprint. The first is, when will SunRail connect to the Orlando International Airport?
Well, currently we have the connection from the coal line, I guess, roughly from the Meadowwoods station on SunRail Phase 2, which is just south of Sand Lake Road, that connects over to the airport. That project has been submitted to the Federal Transit Administration for a project to enter into a phase that's referred to as project development, essentially the design of the facility. And then they'll be able to enter into a full funding grant agreement with the Federal Transit Administration and move that project forward. Timing on it will depend on, as many projects do, on funding, but it is well underway and being reviewed.
Okay, great. And we have another question about the Colonial corridor. So will the transit corridor on Colonial consist of cable cars? How far west will the line eventually reach? And when will the project be started?
Well, there's currently an alternatives analysis that is a term which is really a study that really analyzes the corridor. And currently there's the State Road 50 alternatives analysis, which really answers kind of a lot of those questions that were asked. The corridor in the study area follows State Road 50 from the west side at the Lake County boundary, the Orange Lake boundary, all the way to Alafay Trail into the UCF area. Very long corridor, very complex corridor, a lot going on with population and employment along the corridor. During that alternatives analysis, they identify different types of modes and how to go about doing that, and the costs associated with the different operational strategies, and whether the population and employment supports a certain type of transit mode, whether it's express bus to the more lucrative types of transit operations, streetcar and light rail. So that study is ongoing, and I see some results coming out of it really in the next 12 to 16 months.
Okay, and we have a question on another corridor that is currently under study. So the question is, when will we have a rail connection to the Eustis area?
Well, that is yet another study referred to also as an alternatives analysis, and it's the official name of it is the US 441 Corridor Study. And that is further along in the State Road 50. We should actually be having what's referred to as a locally preferred alternative for that project come before the MetroPlan Board later this year, sometime late in 2014, which will identify the technology. And currently they're looking in that corridor at either a commuter rail system or a combination commuter rail and express bus system, or an entirely bus system, express bus system. But again, we'll have a locally preferred alternative before the MetroPlan board sometime later this year.
We have a question about bike trails. Will bike trails be part of rail and transit routes?
Well, there are a lot of possibilities in the region. One of the more exciting, I think, is in working with our neighboring jurisdictions on not just a successful regional trails program, but on something that's even more ambitious. For example, one of the projects that we have underway is what's called a coast-to-coast trail. We've got a few gaps that need to be connected, but this would allow people to begin over on the east coast of Florida in Brevard County and make a trip all the way across central Florida and end over on the beaches in Pinellas County. And that's pretty exciting to be able to do that on a trail, on a bike trail. That would be the first under a program called Closing the Gaps, but I think others will follow that. This is extremely popular, has a lot of public support, and our Coast to Coast project, I think, will be the first big one that's done in the state.
Okay, and our next question is, why has it been so difficult to get a rail system going in Central Florida? Wouldn't such a rail system get a lot of cars off the road? Why has it been so difficult here?
Well, that's certainly the idea behind it, is to relieve traffic congestion and provide people with an alternative. Also, as one of the folks who participated in this MetroPlan Live event earlier called attention to, rail can be a powerful tool in shaping growth, and that was a large part of the whole How Shall We Grow process. I think it's been so difficult because it reflects a change that's happened here in Central Florida. As we become a more urban place, we can't depend on the old methods to get us around. And it's not unusual when you look at communities across the country to find people being very hesitant to take that step. And it often takes a few attempts and a few failures before it begins. And then when it starts, it proves to be very popular and it grows. So I'd attribute it to the change process, with many people wondering whether this type of thing is necessary or not. But as we look at future opportunities and difficulties with siting new roads or widening existing roads, I think people are eager to see a more effective alternative in place.
How many new toll roads are expected with our 2040 plan?
Well, Alex spoke about the exciting work underway on behalf of the Osceola County Expressway Authority. In addition to those, I don't believe there are any new toll roads in addition to I-4 and the Wekiva Parkway. So it would be the Osceola County Expressway Authority, the opening of the Wekiva Parkway, which had been discussed earlier, and the introduction of the express toll lanes on I-4.
Does MetroPlan and do Central Florida legislators support a switch to a tax for vehicle miles traveled? So does MetroPlan Orlando as an organization and do Central Florida legislators support a switch to a tax for vehicle miles traveled?
We've never had a vote on that, although the topic has been discussed. I think it's important that people understand there are options and perhaps more effective options out there as we look long term. But clearly, when you look at the patterns that have evolved, for example, electric vehicles are a wonderful addition to the fleet, very, very environmentally friendly, but people who use electric are paying nothing to use the transportation system. That simply doesn't meet the basic test of fairness. So we need to look at better ways. But a formal position on this has not been taken by the MetroPlan Orlando board.
Okay, and another person asks, they mentioned specifically the Salt Lake City sales tax, and they ask, can we learn from the success of Salt Lake City and how they got to where they are today? What can we learn?
I think that serves as an excellent example. Salt Lake City has made very good use of local resources, local sales taxes, to leverage a lot of additional federal money that's come into the program out there. They have a good light rail system and a commuter rail system, and they've made a huge commitment to transit. They too started out in a very modest way, went to show what it could do. It's enjoyed a lot of public support, and it's grown.
Will you be able to implement more roundabouts? Studies have shown that they are more efficient in directing traffic, and sometimes cars are stopped at stoplights and intersections without anybody going through them.
Well, that's really a question for local governments, and I think that there's a great interest in going from what has been traditionally signalized intersections, where all vehicles are required at some point to stop before they proceed through the intersection. And roundabouts provide an opportunity for vehicles in the traffic to keep moving, so that it is more efficient. But again, MetroPlan Orlando is not in the design and construction side of transportation, but we do support the use of innovation and whatever methods that we can safely support for moving vehicles and people and goods more efficiently.
Okay, thank you. We also had a question about using metering to get onto highway systems. Some areas and other parts of the country use stoplights to allow users or drivers to get on to their major highway systems. Is this something that Central Florida has ever considered?
We did look at what's called ramp metering some years ago as a possible method of improving flows on Interstate 4. The conclusion of that analysis was that for that to be done and done properly, it really needs to be designed and engineered in the proper way. For example, you need large stacking areas, large queuing areas on the ramps. And in most cases, with I-4 having been designed in the 50s, it really wasn't designed for that purpose, and there aren't the areas there where people could be queued up to use that system effectively.
Valerie from Sanford would like to know, the LYNX system is changing, and she's seeing some routes cut because of SunRail. Why are some routes being cut?
Well, some of the LYNX routes are being reconfigured to better serve the SunRail stations. And as those plans have been shared in the communities that are served by those routes, some people have expressed concerns that the new service will not be as convenient for them as the old service had been. So I know in the case of the Sanford area, the service planners at LYNX are taking a look at that, and I think some work is underway to figure out how to balance the needs of existing communities while also serving the SunRail station in Sanford.
Okay, thank you very much. And for the sake of time, this next one will be our last question. We'll be giving you instructions in just a few minutes on how to leave questions if you have additional ones, and we will be following back up with you. So our last question is, what role will LYNX have in SunRail administration in the future?
Well, for the next 7 years, SunRail will be operated by the Florida Department of Transportation. And that is by agreement. When the SunRail project was put together and 4 counties and the city of Orlando came together to create it. The oversight body for that is the Central Florida Commuter Rail Commission, which is comprised of elected officials from Volusia County, Seminole County, Orange County, Osceola County, and the city of Orlando. So that covers the next 7 years. After that period, we're going to have to make a decision here in the region as to who will actually take operating responsibility for SunRail. So there are a variety of options out there. No decisions have been made yet, but we've got a little time to work on that. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We hope you have a better idea of what's in store for the year 2040. To improve the transportation system, the entire Central Florida community must work together. We hope you'll stay in touch.